Welcome back, Internet. Today is Friday, September 11th, and in light of the amount of rainfall that we've gotten here in southeast Nebraska for the past week, we're going to do this a little bit differently this morning and kind of give you a virtual tour of the soybeans via our seed building. So a couple things that's going on in soybeans and has been going on really all summer long between the Roundup Ready to Xtend varieties and the Roundup Ready to Xtend Flex. You've probably heard a fair amount of controversy with the Xtend Flex and with the XtendiMax in the courts and the rulings and those types of things. From what we know of from your seed partner, XtendiFlex is due to be approved by the European Union at any moment. It's pretty much a done deal. It just has to pass some final inspections and some committee meetings, and then of course it's going to be ready for commercialization and sale. So I tell you that part to tell you this part. We really have two versions of the plots this year. This morning we're going to go through the Roundup Ready to Xtend soybean plot, which you've come to know and have planted and used in the past seasons, and look at some of the historic placement and data that we know of. These varieties will still be in play for the 2021 season. Also, we will tackle the Xtend Flex in the next YouTube video, and Steve Johnson will be doing that via some of the plot work that we've done down at Mynard, and we did that taping here a few weeks ago. So with that, let's start talking about some of the plot work that we know of in soybeans. So as we have talked about and spoke about with the corn plots, we put the soybean plots into this grid again. And as a reminder, the grid is basically every variety that we sell in about 36 locations across southeast Nebraska. And we try to give you this year's data, we give you last year's data, or maybe even 3 or 4 years ago data, if the variety is that old. It has no statistical power. The power is in the replication of the geographic sites. So everyone has a different recipe to grow soybeans, just like they do in corn. Soybeans are a little bit different in that how they react to some of the inputs and that type of thing, and that's where this really comes into play from a standpoint of how did the beans react to this year's weather. It was hot, it was dry, it was wet, it was cold. We had it all this year in soybeans, and it came at different times that we speak of in corn. So pay attention to the grid as we go through the fall. So we'll start talking about the Roundup Ready to Xtend beans, starting here on the right-hand side with AG29X9. 29X9s came out of the class of 19, so it's working on its third year of commercialization. Remember, in the class that it's released, usually it's been out for a year in pre-commercial trials prior to its full commercial release. 29X9s have a nice fit, and if you look at the plant type or the phenotype, it's kind of a bushy bean, very well potted, and it's medium height in plant height. It's about average is what we would call about a 36, 40-inch soybean. And how that comes into play is many times we get beans that are too tall. They yield well, but they have some lodging issues, or you have trouble harvesting them, getting them into the head, pushing on the sickle bar, that type of thing. That's where 29X9s have a nice fit. Here's a little data for you. 53% of the time, plus or minus 4 RM, just like in corn. So that's going down to a 2.5 soybean up to a 3.3 soybean. We got 178 comparisons. 53% of the time, it's 2/10 of a bushel above the leading competitive varieties. Now that doesn't say a lot. However, I point out the consistency in this. Last year, it was 0.2 bushels above the 2019 plot average. Plot average in southeast Nebraska here, again, is always a moving target. What we had last year was in the low 60s as far as a plot average. 23% of the time it's in the top 3, 31% of it's in the top half. Has the RPS 1C for phytophthora root rot, good for brown stem rot. It's a nice, fast emerging, no-till soybean, good on iron chlorosis, has a lot of utility. You can put it in high end or low yield environments, and it does quite well. Also, it's got cyst tolerance with the R3 gene, and you can kind of see it's a medium tall plant. 29X9s, 27X8s, 27X9s in this late Group 2 market have found a lot of utility with us for some September harvested soybeans. Are they the best beans? And that's generally a reflection of the year that you've had. My suspicion is that some of the earlier maturity, early planted soybeans in 2020 will be some of your better yielding beans. And that's generally a reflection of that week of 100-degree heat that we had here about 2 weeks ago. That kind of pulled some of these beans back as far as high yielding potential with the forward season maturity. But it does give you some options looking at something below a Group 3. All right, in the middle, we've got 33XOs. On the right, we have 29X9s, and on the left are 36X6s. So let's talk about 33XOs. Class of 20, brand new bean last year, first year of true commercialization this year, and it's an awesome looking plant. It has the yield potential that we've come to know and appreciate with 36X6. Win percentages for 33X0, 76% of the time, plus or minus 4 RM, again going down to a 2.9 up to a 3.7 in this case. 2.3 bushel yield advantage against competitive varieties, and that's across 192 comparisons. Last year, it was 2.4 above the average. 56% of the time it's in the top 3, and 81% of the time it's in the top half. Awful consistent, nice dryland bean, and that's all we generally have here in southeast Nebraska. In addition to its yieldability, it's got the 1C in for Phytophthora root rot, which is kind of a standard within the Asgrow lineup. As far as the genes that are used for Phytophthora. Good brown stem rot, nice dryland environment. It's a medium tall bean. Now, I would call this one tall. If you look left to right, right in the middle, this thing's pretty tall. These beans can get upwards of 4.5 feet tall. Why is that important? Well, it kind of goes back down to our placement issues. This would be a nice hill bean, nice terrace bean, nice bean for stress acres. Maybe you're a little light on fertility. pH is a little bit out of whack. It kind of handles all dryland environments. Good disease package late to handle that plant height, and it's got good resistance for sudden death syndrome, white mold, and late season disease package with brown stem rot. So now we'll focus in the middle on 36X6. Now 36X6 was first released back in 2016, which is kind of unheard of for a soybean variety to hang around this long. Now, what it does speak to is its consistent yieldability, its adaptability for geographic placements from bottoms to hills to irrigated to dryland, and it just yields quite well. It has been an industry staple. It's been a variety that many other competitive brands will select to run yield checks on, and here's the reason why that happens. We've got a ton of data on this stuff because it's been around for a long, long time. 1,481 comparisons, so almost 1,500 comparisons. 77% of the time within those 1,500 comparisons, it's got a 3.8 bushel yielding competitive advantage. Think about that. And I mentioned that because of what we talked about with 33X0s as far as the percentages of winning. Percentages in the top half, percentages in the top 3. 36X0s kind of mimic 36X6s because we're in the high 70, 80% win rates. So last year it was 2.8 above the average, 50% of the times in the top 3, 88% in the top half, similar to what we found with percentage placements with 33X0s. Now, here's the thing that I always look at and consider when making suggestions on what growers should think about for planting in the following year. It's all about averages. It's all about different environments and different conditions because as much as we try to manage you, weather we can't do. And when you look at averages across the past few years of 36X6, kind of similar to what you've seen. It's awful consistent. In 2018, 72% of the time it's in the top 3, 88% in the top half, kind of maintaining those same types of placements that we see in 2019. 2017, 50% in the top three, 87% in the top half. 2016, 73% in the top three, 100% in the top half. So many times folks will ask us, well, all right, I like 36X6, I planted them for a number of years, please don't take them away because they work really well for me. With the advent of Xtend Flex soybeans, will 36X6 or 33XOs go away quickly? The answer to that is no. They will still be around. You will still have a Roundup Ready to Xtend option. And I've said this many times before, this is not about your trait platform. This is about your genetic performance. Things that put it in the bin for you, things that you get paid on, not so much the trait platform associated with it. 36X6 has done that consistently for the last 5 years. So now in the middle, we'll talk about AG37X8s. Now this was out of the class of 2018. It's 2 years newer than what we found with 36X6. And I've always looked at 37X8s as kind of the twin sister to 36X6 as it just was brought to the commercial market a little bit later in its life. 60% of the time, plus or minus 4 RM again, so down to a 3.3, up to a 4.1, 912 comparisons. It's winning by 1.8. Not quite the yield punch that we see with 36X6, but I think that comes down to a matter of the genetic placement, and we'll get to that here in a minute. 900, and that was again across 912 comparisons. Last year, 0.2 of a bushel above the plot average, 56% of the time in the top half, 19% in the top three. In 2018, 40% in the top three, 80% in the top half. In 2017, 32% in the top three, 79% in the top half. So it's awful consistent in the top half. It doesn't quite have some of that yield punch that we find with 36X6, and here's some of the reason why. 37X8s are truly a marketed product for the dry land, low productive, stress acre. Now if you think about that, since 2016 or 2018 for that matter, we really haven't had much of those weather conditions around here to really show its genetic ability to handle dry weather, tough soils, stress acres, because it keeps raining. So the data is kind of skewed towards 36X6 in that, wow, it out yields 37X8s and anything else in the mid-group 3 market. And that's true. However, 37X8s are a nice dryland fit. I've always thought they have been. They've always looked that way. Kind of a medium tall bean, similar in height to 36s, maybe just a touch shorter. That sounds wrong, but it's just a touch shorter in plant height than 36X6. Little agronomy on it. Nice cyst bean, works well on all row spacings, tillage. Good SDS and Phytophthora root rots defenses, and it's very good in no-till. So, you know, we always try to make these suggestions to kind of look at 36X6 and 37X8s interchangeably, primarily because I think it's a nice insurance policy when you're looking at what the weather's going to do to you in August. Now I'll finish with 39X7s. 39X7 of the class of 17, win percentage is 47% of the time plus or minus. 4RM again down to a 3.5 up to a 4.3, 787 comparisons here in southeast Nebraska, southwest Iowa. Yieldability, okay, it's right at the plot average. 1/10 of a bushel against the competitive varieties across those 787 comparisons. Last year was kind of an off year for 39X7s, 1.6 bushels below the average. It was 7% of the time it was in the top three, 27% of the time in the top half. Now, that's enough to dismiss it. We don't want to plant that. Geez, it's not very consistent. However, consider this. If you look at the historic data, if you look at 2018, 75% of the time it's in the top half. In 2017, 63% of the time it's in the top half. In 2016, 67% of the time it's in the top half. Tall, bushy plant, Again, being patronized by the weather that we've had the past 5 or 6 years, it really truly hasn't shown its adaptability, much like we talked about with 37X8s, to where it's genetically positioned. When we talk about cyst resistance and good tolerance to SDS and broad stem rot, it certainly has that. It's got the RPS1C gene in for Phytophthora, like we've talked about with other varieties. 39X7s have been a nice bridge for us in that wider road, 30-inch row spacing, tougher acre soil, much like we found with 37X8s. It's just kind of been overshadowed by some of the performance lately out of the mid-group 3 beans. So to kind of summarize, when we're talking about Roundup Ready to Xtend beans, they're still going to be around for the next few years. There's going to be a lot of press and a lot of material come out this fall during harvest surrounding your Xtend Flex soybeans. I encourage you again to look at the genetics, not so much the trait platform. How does the genetics adapt to your management style? How does it adapt to your acres, your fertility levels, and those types of things? Those are the important things to consider, not so much the trait platform. In our next YouTube video, Steve Johnson, our branded agronomist, will visit with you about the Xtend Flex germplasm. It's a big one in that the lineup has generally been flipped, meaning that there are options from a mid-group 2 all the way up to a 4.2 in maturity. Things that will complement some of these Roundup Ready 2 varieties, some of the things that also share some of the same parentage that we see in some of our staples like 36X6. So stay tuned to that. It'll be coming in the next few days.